Hello. This is my presentation about Spotify's digital graphics and how those digital graphics contributed to Spotify's success. So let's start with how did Spotify even reach such high digital graphic success and success in general? Oh my God, something just fell. But anyways, um, this all has to do with the history of music players and how that graphic design translates into Spotify and into the Spotify that we use now. Um, Another aspect would be Spotify's graphic design and Spotify's incredibly smooth UI. So, how many people here actually use Spotify? I don't necessarily have an audience to ask right now because I'm recording this, but I assume many of you use Spotify on a regular basis. And that makes sense because Spotify in 2020 actually reached 299 million users and 138 million subscribers, which is not a small number. But how did this even come to be? Like, what's the passion behind Spotify's visual atmosphere in the first place? Um, and that base was established by Daniel Ek and Martin Lorentzen, who are two Swedish businessmen that decide to get together in an apartment and create a combination of words called spot and identify. And that's Spotify. As you can see on the left, that's them and the old Spotify logo from 2008. And the rest was history. So, where does the design influence begin when it comes to Spotify's design? Um, I would say the beginning would be the first music box, which had a really simple crank system, which where you crank the box and that metal disc, as you can see on the top, spins and interacts with those little bearing type pieces, and that makes music based off of how the notches interact with each other and the little clinks that go on in the plate. Um, so, why is this important? This is important because this is what eventually came to be the vinyl, and the vinyl record player, of course, evolved into further technology that we will speak about very soon. Um, but this just established the base of familiarity for music players. And that contemporary music player that contains a lot of graphic design that we see on Spotify right now and a lot of other music platforms is the Philips cassette player, which was invented in 1963. And this, in my opinion, is the most familiar um, machine that held the most graphic design that is used now in music players. Um, and as you can see on the bottom, there is a little switch with two with arrows pointing in each direction, telling you that you need to move the switch in a certain direction in order to go backwards and forwards. Um, and that is obviously what became the rewind buttons and forward buttons of Spotify and a lot of other music platforms today. So that's why old music platforms have such high importance when it comes to their design and how that interacts with Spotify's brand new design. Okay, so why is Spotify's connection to the musical platforms that came before it so important? And the reason as to why that is because Spotify's logo and its design history has to establish the correct tone in its brand identity. So when that name Spotify was made, Spot Identify, that was in a direct effort to spot and identify new music that the user could possibly listen to. Um, so the logo itself has to be not only iconic as any other brand logo, but has to mean something. And that meaning is in those three lines, which is not the Wi-Fi symbol, but it's supposed to signify waves of sound that translates into music. And this is a very effective yet simple logo, and you can even see it in its really old logo in 2008. That those three little lines, I guess it's four in the old logo, but that's present in order to really show its roots in streaming and its roots in music. Another example would be the general layout and how the design history incorporates itself into Spotify. So the whole point is for Spotify to reduce its cognitive load, and it does that by making it really easy for the user to comprehend what everything is, because it's so familiar. It's for older people who did use cassettes back then and cassette players. Um, it uses very similar graphic design. On the bottom left, you can see that there's a little radio icon, and that little radio icon has waves similar to the logo that Spotify has. On the bottom right, you can see those common arrows that you saw on the cassette player earlier. Those are still present. And even on the bottom, that volume slider, that icon that you can see in a lot of other programs online, that icon is similar to a speakerphone that would either transmit some sort of sound, whether it be from your voice or from a record. Those all little icons work together to bring a really familiar feel to the layout that Spotify has. So, guys, earlier we talked about how Spotify's graphics related to old music players, but those aren't all the graphics that Spotify uses. So, how do the non-music related graphic designs, how are those vital to Spotify's visual success? Um, the first example is going to be its general layout, going back to the general layout that we used earlier. Um, as you can see, there are a lot of little icons that all identify each genre. As you can see, on the bottom right, there is the workout icon, which is signified by a dumbbell, which most of you might know is related to working out and exercising. And even on the back, there's a little image that I believe has someone tying their shoe and a little jump rope on the ground. So all of these efforts combine for each genre, all make it really distinct, and it makes it really easy to follow what each one has to do with the word workout or the word pop or the word country. It all works together in order to make a really consistent and really easy to read layout using illustrations and graphic design. Um, so, a different example that would be a little less successful in general would be the mobile music layouts. So, mobile layouts are typically a lot smaller, and most of the time they're a little iffy because it could be hard to see what you're looking for with such a little screen. I think I have my phone around me. I have the iPhone 12 mini, so this thing is kind of tiny. Um, and there's not much work space that you can have when looking at a mobile layout. So, um, one example that I would call a little less successful is the Apple Music mobile layout. I actually use Apple Music because of a situational thing I have going on. So I relate to how this could be a little more difficult. But as you can see on the genres tab, Apple Music has just a bunch of really oversimplistic little lines of text, that being A through Z, what the genres are: adult, alternative. I know what alternative is, but I don't know what adult has to do with anything. And then there's African. I could probably get a sense of what that could be. But then there's Afrobeat and Afro pop, and then Afro beats again. And I just don't know what each of them have to do with um, the type of music that I want to be listening to. I have no distinction as far as I know. And there's just a decent amount of confusion and important info that just isn't present there. All of these look the same. And there's a lot of white space on the right hand side of the screen, and there's just I feel like it could definitely do more. And that's where Spotify comes in. It definitely does more. Um, Instantly, you can see that those title cards all have separate colors that represent maybe not necessarily the genre, but at least it gives it a good distinction and makes each one interesting to look at compared to the other. So a good example would be the pop icon title card that has a little album cover or playlist cover. I believe that's Olivia Rodrigo, which I know as a pop artist, and a lot of you might know as a pop artist. That aspect of putting that image just instantly makes it a lot easier to understand what I'm looking at. And the even though there's a lot of genres, each one I could kind of tell what I'm going to be getting into, and maybe even piques my interest. So I believe that's why Spotify's mobile graphic design is a lot more effective than, say, Apple Music's. So, we talked about Spotify's graphic design, and we talked about Spotify's design when it comes to reflecting those old music players. But how does its user interface, how does that also reduce the cognitive load and the difficulties that you have when navigating a system? And how does that really provide a good structure for what Spotify is? So let's get into that. Um, the general layout of the UI within Spotify is, in my opinion, one of the most distinct. The easiest example to point out is that all of the artists, anything that has to do with people and exploring someone's discography, all of that is in surrounded in a little circle, as you can see. On the top left, the top result is a band, I think, named Pavement. And under that, you can see that it says artist. And right next to it, um, surrounded in a square icon, are everything else that you can explore and delve into that is just like a general um, space that you can look into in terms of songs or playlists or even radio. And I think this is an expert decision because it makes even more specific categorizations that are present on the bottom of the screen even more easy to look through. So on the bottom of the screen, you can see four major sections, which is songs, artists, albums, and playlists. And all of the songs and the albums and the playlists all have that square icon. And if I was interested in a song, I would be able to easily read what the title is. I would obviously be able to tell that it's a song. And even though albums, playlists, and songs all have that square icon, it is something that is, if you're confused about, you can just look at those categories. And in the artist category, you can again see that that circle is surrounding anything that has to do with people. So I think these are really simple and really specific examples, but all of these tie together to give Spotify an incredible and really smooth and easy to understand user interface. And another example would be the side tabs that you can see that are a little darker than the middle tab. Um, on the left, you can see a long set of little words, and those are your playlists and anything that has to do with your personal um, collection of things that you have, whether that be a playlist or an album or a certain artist you like. It's all familiar. So it doesn't give you too much information, but all of it is nice and set in this little set of columns. And that's part of what makes Spotify such a personal platform. On the right, you can see friend activity, and what do you know? Those friends are surrounded in a circle similar to the other artists. And it just tells you that, again, this has to do with people. You're looking at something related to real people, and you can see what your friends are listening to. So that's just part of what also makes this UI so great. Um, and what is Spotify's legacy? Spotify's legacy all has to do with, or at least its design legacy, all has to do with absorbing commonalities in the music players of the past, as we spoke earlier, and just having that understanding of all of its parts um, makes it so smooth, and it just understands what the user really wants, and it's to be able to look for more music and understand what they're looking at, and all of that makes it so smooth, and it really increases the chances of finding new music, which is kind of the whole point of having such a large array of music. It really encourages you to look more into what you would like and what you like already. So that was my presentation about Spotify's digital graphics. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you so much.